Welcome back, you night owls. Tonight we aren't just easing into a story, we're stepping over the threshold into a dusty candlelit chamber where every word is a risk. Feel the cold stone beneath your feet, the chill that seeps through your slippers and up into your bones. The air smells of old parchment, dry dust, and the faint, unsettling scent of fear. You see a flicker of candlelight reflecting off an ornate leather binding, a book so heavy with forbidden knowledge that simply touching it could be your last act. You're about to read from a manuscript so dangerous, so utterly heretical, that its discovery was a death sentence. People weren't just punished for owning it. They were burned at the stake, their bodies reduced to ash alongside the very words that had condemned them. You'll be one of them, in spirit at least. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you're out there in the dark, maybe let me know your location and the local time. It's always a treat to know who's listening and where. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing there, a figure in the shadows, watching a man hunched over a work table. The year is 1422, a time when the world feels both vast and incredibly small, and the truth is something not to be discovered, but to be dictated. The man, a scribe named Elias, is working late, the only light coming from a single tallow candle that casts long dancing shadows on the walls of his tiny room. The scent of melted wax and damp stone fills the air. This isn't your typical scriptorium filled with monks copying psalms. No, this space is hidden, tucked away in the back of a tanner's shop in a grimy, bustling alley in Venice. The stench of cured leather is a strange, ironic comfort. It's the smell of commerce, of everyday life, and a perfect camouflage for the intellectual contraband being created within. Elias is not a monk, and the text he is painstakingly transcribing is anything but holy. This is a copy of a book that doesn't officially exist, a book so subversive its name has been erased from most records. Or perhaps it never had a proper name to begin with, only whispered epithets like the Shadow Treatise or the Serpent's Words. His quill scratches on the vellum, a soft rhythmic sound that is both soothing and profoundly unsettling. He pauses, dips his quill into a small pot of ink, and you lean in closer, peering over his shoulder. The script is not Latin, the language of the church and of polite society, but rather an early form of vernacular Italian, laced with strange, almost alchemical symbols. This is a key point, a mainstream historical fact that often gets overlooked. The move from Latin to vernacular languages was a revolutionary act in itself. It was the moment that knowledge and heresy could jump the fence from the educated elite to the common person. The church understood this instinctively, which is why translating scripture into the language of the people was considered a profound act of defiance, and this book takes that defiance to an entirely new level. The words on the page argue for something audacious, something so simple yet so terrifying to the established powers that it's practically a declaration of war. They propose that God is not a remote, all-powerful king in the sky, but an immanent force woven into the very fabric of the world. Creation, the text suggests, is not a one-time event but a continuous unfolding process. To the common man of the 15th century, this might sound like a subtle theological distinction, but to the church, it's a dagger to the heart of their authority. If God is everywhere, then what need is there for a priest, a church, a pope, or any intermediary at all? You can't control a God who resides in a flower or a babbling brook. The book doesn't just question, it offers an alternative reality, one where salvation isn't earned through sacraments and obedience, but through direct personal experience of the divine. This is where things get truly dangerous. The book argues for a direct mystical relationship with the divine that bypasses the church's entire hierarchical structure. It's a bit like someone today suggesting you don't need a phone company to make a call because you can just whisper into the wind and the person on the other end will hear you. It sounds quaint, maybe even a little silly, but it completely disrupts the entire system. And the system, of course, is prepared to do anything to protect itself. Elias is a ghost in the shadows of this narrative, a vessel for the ideas. But what about the author? This is a point of open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the text was the work of a single brilliant heretic or more likely a collective of disillusioned scholars and mystics who pooled their forbidden ideas. Some believe it originated with a Coptic sect in Egypt and was smuggled to Europe via trade routes, its core ideas translated and adapted over centuries. Others think it's the work of a single, brilliant scholar, a man so disillusioned with the political machinations of the Church that he saw no other option but to set the world alight with a new truth. The truth, in this case, is likely a mix of both. Ideas don't just spring from a single source. They evolve, they mutate, they find new homes and new vessels. And then there's a quirky detail that most people don't know about. Elias, in a moment of pure, defiant genius, uses a special ink. It's not just carbon and water, it's a concoction of soot mixed with a few drops of wine, a pinch of myrrh for its preservative properties, and most bizarrely a little bit of crushed scorpion venom. The venom, in theory, was meant to prevent insects from eating the vellum, but it became a morbid symbol, a poison to protect a poison, a testament to the deadly ideas within the book. It's a macabre little detail, a whisper of the ancient world in the medieval era, and it speaks to the obsessive lengths people went to in order to preserve these texts. As you watch him work, you notice a small, worn pouch hanging from his belt. It's filled with coins, payment for a job he knows could get him killed. He works without haste, each stroke of the quill deliberate and precise. He's not just copying a book, he's participating in a quiet revolution. He doesn't know who the book is for or who will read it. He only knows that the man who commissioned the work, a portly merchant who came to him in the dead of night, promised a sum of money that could buy his family a home and a small plot of land far from the city. The transaction was simple, yet laden with a tension that hums in the air. This isn't just business, it's a gamble, a roll of the dice with your soul and your life on the line. The candle flickers, threatening to go out. Elias ignores it, his focus absolute. He is a small cog in a large invisible machine, a machine designed to spread ideas in a world that wants to keep them bottled up. You can't help but feel a tremor of both fear and excitement. This is the moment, the genesis of something truly world-shattering. This is where it all begins, and you, dear listener, are here to witness it. The page fills with elegant, dangerous script. The words begin to take on a life of their own, no longer just ink on vellum, but a living, breathing thing. A thing that wants to get out, to be read, to change minds, and to start a fire that will not be easily extinguished. You're holding your breath now, aren't you? It's okay. You're in the dark, and you're safe. For now. But the story is only just beginning. The candle sputters, a tiny burst of light in the consuming dark, and you pull back just a hair's breadth, as if the heat from the flame could somehow burn you. Elias the scribe doesn't even flinch. He's a man made of calm and shadows, his movements so deliberate they could be a form of meditation. His fingers, stained with ink and calloused from long hours of work, hold the quill with a tenderness that feels almost sacrilegious, given the words he is committing to vellum. He's nearing the end of a page now, and you can see the meticulous care in every curve of every letter. This isn't just transcription, it's an art form, a dangerous ballet of hand and mind. The subtle mix of soot, wine, myrrh, and a bit of crushed scorpion venom in the ink gives the script a strange, almost shimmering quality in the flickering candlelight. It's an almost perfect, tangible representation of the book's contents. Beautiful and deadly. You watch as he finishes the final word on the page, then carefully lifts the vellum and sets it aside to dry, adding it to a growing stack of sheets. Each one holds a small, elegant time bomb. Elias works in a silence so profound you can hear the faint scratching of rats in the walls and the distant murmur of the city, a city that would happily hang him from the nearest gallows if they knew what he was doing. His entire life is a quiet contradiction. By day, he is a respectable, if poor, member of a Venetian guild, taking on minor commissions for merchants, ledgers, bills of lading, the mundane paperwork that keeps the world turning. By night, he is a heretic's accomplice, a silent partner in a conspiracy that spans continents and centuries. This is a crucial historical fact, the widespread and surprisingly efficient network of scribes and book smugglers that existed long before the printing press. People think of the Middle Ages as a time of intellectual stagnation, but it was anything but. There was a secret world of information exchange, a kind of dark web of the 15th century, and Elias is a node in it. He turns to a fresh sheet of vellum and you notice something you hadn't before. Scrolled in the margin of the previous page, barely visible in the dim light, is a tiny, ornate drawing of a serpent coiled around a blossoming branch. It's not part of the text, but a personal addition, a signature of defiance. This is one of those wonderfully quirky tidbits. Scribes would often add small, personal flourishes to their work, called marginalia, sometimes humorous, sometimes religious. In this case, Elias is leaving his mark, a silent, beautiful act of rebellion. The serpent, traditionally a symbol of temptation and sin, is here a symbol of hidden knowledge and rebirth. He's not just a copyist, he's a participant, a believer in the power of the words he's spreading. He's a quiet fan of the author's work, a kind of early literary groupie. It makes you wonder what kind of stories a 15th century fan fiction community might have produced. Probably not what you'd think. Maybe a romantic comedy about a love-struck knight and a talking dragon who debates theology. The central argument of the book is what truly terrifies the establishment. It's not a direct attack on the existence of God, which would be a simple heresy to condemn. Instead, it redefines what God is, arguing that the divine is an all-pervading energy, a kind of cosmic hum that vibrates through every single thing in the universe. It's a pantheistic view, where God and creation are one and the same. It suggests that prayer is not about asking a distant entity for favours, but about tuning yourself to that cosmic hum, finding harmony with the divine energy within you and all around you. It's a very chill, very go-with-the-flow kind of spirituality, which is precisely what makes it so dangerous to an institution built on rules, rituals, and strict hierarchies. It's hard to tax a cosmic hum, and even harder to burn it at the stake. This is a point of open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the author truly intended this work to be a theological treatise, or if it was meant as a philosophical or even alchemical text. Some scholars believe the author was more interested in an abstract intellectual exercise, a sort of what-if scenario for a new kind of spiritualism, rather than a blueprint for an actual revolution. They argue the book was an academic curiosity, a thought experiment that was misinterpreted by those who stumbled upon it. Others, however, are convinced that the author was a true revolutionary, a kind of medieval spiritual anarchist, who saw the church as a corrupting force and wanted to give people a way to connect directly with the divine, bypassing all the earthly middlemen. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, as it so often is. The book's meaning likely changed depending on who was reading it. To a scholar, it was a philosophical text. To a peasant, it was a manual for rebellion. As the night deepens, Elias continues his work. He's been at it for hours, his focus unwavering. He's a testament to a truth that still holds today. If you want to get an idea out there, you need people willing to do the boring, painstaking work of making it real. You can have the most brilliant, world-changing idea, but if it remains only in your head, it's useless. The physical act of creation, of putting ink on paper, is what makes an idea concrete, and, therefore, a threat. The smell of the ink, that strange mix of mundane soot and forbidden venom, seems to fill the small room. You can almost taste it. It's the flavour of intellectual freedom and mortal danger, all mixed together. A strange, bitter cocktail you can't help but want to drink. He looks up, and for a terrifying moment you think he sees you. His eyes, though, are just adjusting to the gloom. He reaches for a small wooden box and opens it. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, is a tiny, perfectly preserved piece of a rose petal. He holds it for a moment, his thumb gently stroking its surface, before placing it carefully on the corner of the sheet he's working on. This is a quiet, secret ritual of his, a tribute to his deceased wife, who loved flowers, and a way of reminding himself why he's taking this terrifying risk. He's not doing this for abstract ideals, or even just for the money. He's doing it for a future that is not just free but beautiful, a future where his children's children could think and believe as they chose without fear of being burned, a future he will likely never see. The pages pile up, each one a step on a journey that will span continents and centuries. This single act, this lonely man in a dusty room, is the butterfly wing that will eventually set off a hurricane. You can almost hear the rumble of the coming storm, the fire, the fear, the quiet, desperate hope. It all started here, with a scribe, a pot of unusual ink and a secret that was simply too big to contain. And as you watch him, You feel a sense of complicity. You're not just an observer anymore, you are a witness. You're a part of the story, a silent accomplice in the greatest intellectual crime of the 15th century. Sleep tight. The air in Elias's workshop, thick with the scent of ink and old paper, now seems to vibrate with a silent hum of forbidden ideas. The pages he has been so carefully copying lie in a neat stack, each one a testament to the quiet, powerful defiance of a single man. You can almost feel the weight of them, not in physical mass, but in the sheer density of their content. The words themselves are not incendiary in the way a firebrand sermon might be. There are no calls to arms, no revolutionary slogans. Instead, they are an insidious and elegant intellectual poison, a slow-acting toxin designed to corrode the foundations of the established world. The core of the book's heresy, its central and most dangerous argument, is its redefinition of the human soul and its relationship with the divine. The traditional Christian view, a mainstream historical fact you're well aware of, held that the soul was a separate created entity, placed within the body by God and destined to return to him after death. It was a clear hierarchical relationship, God above, man below. This book, however, proposes something entirely different. It suggests that the human soul is not just a creation of God, but a fragment of God himself, a tiny glowing ember of the divine fire that exists within every living thing. This isn't just a theological quibble, it's a total subversion of power. If you are a piece of God, what do you need a priest for? What need is there for confession, for penance, for the entire sacramental system? The book argues that salvation is not something to be earned or granted, but a state to be recognised. It's not about climbing a ladder to God, but about realising that you've been at the summit all along. The implications are staggering. If every person carries the divine within them, then the beggar on the street is as holy as the Pope in Rome. The king's authority is no more divinely ordained than the farmer's right to his field. The very concept of a single, infallible church is rendered obsolete. The book argues that true worship is not found in grand cathedrals, but in the quiet contemplation of nature, in the simple act of living a virtuous life, and in the profound personal experience of the divine spark within. This idea is a bit like suggesting that instead of going to a concert hall to listen to a famous musician, you can just find music by listening to the hum of your refrigerator. It seems silly on the surface, but it completely undermines the entire industry of professional musicians, sound engineers, and ticket vendors. In the 15th century, the church was the ultimate professional musician, and this book was suggesting everyone could make their own music. One of the more quirky tidbits from the margins of a surviving fragment of this text, not from Elias's copy, but from a later, more embellished one, is a section on the language of birds. The book suggests that certain birdsongs contain a hidden divine code, a kind of natural prayer that a person can learn to understand if they quiet their mind and listen. It's a beautifully poetic idea and also a perfect example of how the book wove together profound spiritual ideas with a kind of nature-based mysticism. It turns a simple walk in the woods into a profound act of worship, something the church would have a very hard time regulating or controlling. It's an invitation to find the sacred in the mundane, a radical thought for a time when the sacred was supposed to be kept safely locked away inside consecrated buildings. Historians still argue whether the original author of the text believed in these more mystical, almost pagan elements, or if they were later additions by various scribes and interpreters. Some scholars contend that the bird language and other esoteric sections were added to make the book more appealing to certain fringe groups, like alchemists and hermetic philosophers, who were already predisposed to this kind of thinking. Others argue that they are integral to the author's original vision, meant to demonstrate how all of creation is a single, interconnected whole. The debate highlights a key feature of the book's long and dangerous life. It was a living text, not a static document. It changed and evolved as it moved from hand to hand, with each copyist and reader adding their own interpretations and embellishments, a kind of medieval open-source heresy project. The final, and perhaps most terrifying claim of the book, is its assertion about the nature of sin. The Church taught that sin was a specific act of transgression against God's law, an act that required confession and penance to be forgiven. This book, however, argues that sin is not an action but a state of being, a failure to recognise the divine within oneself. It's a separation, not from God, but from your own true nature. To sin in this worldview is simply to forget who you are. This reframing completely invalidates the sacrament of confession and the power of the priesthood to grant absolution. If sin is just a state of spiritual amnesia, then a priest cannot forgive it. Only you can, by remembering who you truly are. It turns the entire power structure of the Church on its head and offers a deeply personal, deeply challenging path to spiritual freedom. Elias continues his work, meticulously copying these treasonous words, completely unaware of the precise and terrible consequences they will bring. He's a craftsman, not a revolutionary, yet he is playing a crucial role in a drama that will unfold for centuries. He doesn't know that this very copy, the one he is painstakingly creating, will one day fall into the hands of a heretic who will be brought before the Inquisition. He doesn't know that the beautiful, elegant script he is so proud of will be used as evidence against an innocent soul. He's just a man doing a job he desperately needs to do, but in the process he is setting a fuse. You feel a chill. The air in the room, so still a moment ago, seems to have a faint, ghostly breeze. It's the whisper of the future, a premonition of the violence and fear that this book will unleash. You can see the pages now not just as parchment and ink, but as kindling. Every word is a spark, every paragraph a small pile of dry leaves, and the whole manuscript is a stack of logs just waiting for a single final flame. The man who ordered this book, the man Elias is working for, is a shadow in this story, a puppeteer pulling strings from afar, but his face will be revealed soon enough, and with his reveal, the true danger will begin. The pages of the forbidden book are now a complete manuscript, bound in plain, unassuming leather, a wolf in sheep's clothing. Elias, the scribe, has finished his work, and you watch as he carefully wraps the tome in a piece of linen. The air in the tiny room feels lighter now, the tension of creation replaced by the anxiety of delivery. The man who commissioned the work, a wealthy merchant named Martino, will be here soon. Elias doesn't know what Martino intends to do with the book, but he knows the man is a collector of unusual things, a connoisseur of secrets. For Elias, it's a completed job and a payment to feed his family. For Martino, it's a new treasure, a key to a new way of thinking, and, as you'll soon see, a death sentence. Martino arrives just as the first light of dawn filters through the alley, painting the grimy streets in shades of grey. He's a large, jovial man with a well-fed belly and a smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. He pays Elias the agreed-upon sum, plus a small bonus for the excellent quality of the work, and takes the wrapped book, treating it like a fragile bird's egg. He offers no explanation, no hint of his plans, and leaves as quickly as he arrived. You watch him go, a portly figure disappearing into the maze of Venetian streets, the book held tightly under his arm. You have to admit he looks more like a man on his way to an all-you-can-eat breakfast than a man carrying a piece of heresy so potent it could get him burned alive. Martino takes the book to his villa, a sprawling estate on the outskirts of Venice, surrounded by manicured gardens and high stone walls. Inside he has a private study, a small dimly lit room filled with books and maps and strange instruments. This is his sanctuary, a place where he can indulge his forbidden interests far from prying eyes. This is a mainstream historical fact. The private libraries of wealthy merchants and nobles were often repositories for texts deemed heretical or dangerous by the Church. These men had the money and the influence to acquire contraband knowledge, and they were often driven by a genuine curiosity that went beyond simple piety. They were the early patrons of a quiet intellectual rebellion. Martino unwraps the book and places it on his desk, his fingers tracing the plain leather binding. He has heard whispers about its content, rumours that it offers a path to God that bypasses the Church entirely. He is not an overly religious man, but he is a deeply spiritual one, a man who has always felt a quiet unease with the rigid rituals and dogmatic pronouncements of the priesthood. He opens the book and begins to read. You see his eyes, usually so calculating and shrewd, soften with a quiet wonder. The words, so elegant and yet so dangerous, speak to a part of him that has long been silent. They promise a direct connection to the divine, a sense of belonging that he has never found in the grand cathedrals. He begins to talk about the book quietly at first, to a few trusted friends. They in turn share the ideas with others. The book is never loaned out, but its core ideas spread by word of mouth, a silent fire that burns from person to person. The ideas are so simple, so liberating, that they resonate deeply with people who are tired of being told what to think and how to feel. A few of Martino's confidants, emboldened by his example, even attempt to make their own copies of the book, but their skills are not as refined as Elias's. These amateur copies, crude and full of errors, only serve to spread the heresy further. This is where the story takes a dark turn. One of Martino's servants, a devout and deeply loyal man, overhears Martino and a friend discussing the book. He doesn't understand the complex theology, but he understands the central, shocking claim that the Pope and the priests are unnecessary. He is terrified. In his simple, unquestioning faith, this is the gravest possible heresy. He knows his duty, and his fear outweighs his loyalty to his master. He slips away from the villa and goes directly to the local inquisitor, Father Anselm. Father Anselm is a man of grim determination. He's not a man to be swayed by argument or reason. To him, heresy is a disease, a spiritual plague that must be eradicated at all costs. This is an open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the inquisitors of the time were motivated by a genuine desire to save souls from eternal damnation, or were simply agents of a political institution, using religion as a tool for social control. The truth, as always, is probably a mix of both. Anselm likely saw himself as a soldier of God, but his actions served the interests of the powerful, keeping the masses in check and maintaining the Church's unassailable authority. Anselm arrives at Martino's villa with a detachment of armed guards. The search is brutal and thorough. They tear apart the furniture, pull down tapestries, and break open locked chests. Martino, shocked and confused, tries to explain that the book is just a philosophical text, a private intellectual exercise. Anselm ignores him. His men find the book in the small, unassuming private study. Anselm takes the book, his eyes widening as he reads a few lines. He doesn't need to read much to recognize the heresy. He holds the book as if it were a venomous snake, his face a mask of cold fury. The trial is a farce. Martino is not even allowed to see the book that is his accuser. He is held in a dark, cold cell, interrogated mercilessly. The accusation is simple. He possessed a book that taught that every man is his own priest, a book that subverted the authority of the Holy See. A quirky little tidbit from the trial records, which still survive in a dusty archive in Venice, is that the inquisitor, Father Anselm, became so enraged by the beauty of the script that he ordered the book to be burned before the trial was even over. He couldn't stand the idea that something so lovely could contain something so wicked. The beauty of the heresy was almost as offensive to him as the heresy itself. Martino, a man of commerce and fine wine, is broken by the ordeal. He cannot defend himself against an institution that sees him not as a man, but as a vessel for an evil idea. He is condemned as a heretic. The sentence is simple and absolute: death by fire. The execution is set for the following week, a public spectacle designed to remind the people of Venice of the terrible consequences of straying from the one true path. On the day of the execution, a crowd gathers in the Piazza San Marco. Martino is led to the pyre, a pile of wood and kindling stacked high. He's no longer the jovial merchant, but a defeated man, his spirit crushed. He is tied to the stake. The pyre is lit. The flames consume the wood. The smoke rises, and Martino's life comes to an end in a terrible final moment. The fire is meant to purify, to cleanse the world of his sin. But as you watch the flames, you realize something. The fire doesn't just destroy. It purifies, yes, but it also spreads. And while Martino's body is consumed, the ideas from the book, the ones that spread from person to person, are still out there, alive and well, passed from mouth to ear, from mind to mind, a spiritual wildfire just waiting for more fuel. The first flame of the pyre has been lit, and it's a long, long night. The smoke from Martino's pyre has long since faded into the Venetian sky, a grim smudge on the horizon, but you can still feel the heat, the lingering fear that such an open display of power was meant to instill. The Church, and the state that served it, believed they had extinguished a dangerous fire. They were wrong. As you learned, the book's ideas had already slipped past the point of no return. You're now a few years later, and you're on a merchant vessel, a sturdy carrack with a hull of oak and sails of canvas, cutting through the choppy waters of the Mediterranean. The air smells of salt and tar, and the rhythmic creak of the ship's timbers is a constant soothing lullaby. Below deck in the cargo hold, nestled between bales of wool and barrels of wine, is a single, small wooden crate. Its contents are not what they seem. Inside the crate, wrapped in oilcloth, are 3 copies of the Forbidden Book. Not Elias's original, that was burned with Martino, but 3 new copies, painstakingly created by a new generation of scribes. They are not as elegant as Elias's work. The script is less refined, and the bindings are coarse and plain. They are meant to be utilitarian, designed to be read and passed on, not admired. These books are the new seeds of heresy, and they are travelling a new path. The merchant who owns this ship, a wiry, nervous man named Alessio, is not a heretic. He is not a believer. He is a pragmatist. He is a businessman. He is a mainstream historical fact. The lifeblood of the medieval world was its trade routes. Goods, people, and most importantly ideas flowed along these arteries. Spices from the east, silks from China, and new, dangerous philosophies from the west all travelled on the same ships, often side by side. Alessio is just moving a product, albeit a very profitable and very dangerous one. The man who paid for the books and arranged for their passage is a mysterious figure, a Greek scholar who lives in a hidden monastery in the hills above Sicily. He is a part of an underground network that is dedicated to the preservation of forbidden knowledge. Alessio knows only that this man's coin is good, and his instructions are clear. Deliver the crate to a specific address in Bruges, a bustling city in the heart of Flanders. He is to ask no questions, and he is to speak of his cargo to no one. He is so terrified of being caught that he sleeps with a small knife under his pillow, not to defend himself from thieves, but to be ready to scuttle the entire crate if he suspects he's being watched. The book's journey is a reflection of its ideas. It is not travelling in a grand procession, or on a scholar's back in a well-worn satchel. It is travelling as cargo, a commodity, just another piece of the world's quiet, constant exchange. The book is not seeking out believers. It is simply going where the currents of commerce and curiosity take it. This is one of those wonderfully quirky tidbits. Alessio, in his fear, has a little ritual. Every night he goes to the hold and places a small dried sardine on top of the crate. He believes it will ward off evil spirits, or perhaps the spiritual evil that he is transporting. It is a desperate, absurd act, a blend of pagan superstition and Christian fear, a perfect representation of the world at this time, where faith and commerce were 2 sides of the same coin, and both were deeply intertwined with a very human need for control. The book's ideas, as they travel, are finding new life, being reinterpreted in new contexts. The original claim that God is an immanent force, woven into the fabric of the world, is now being read by craftsmen and artisans. To them, the book's words are not just abstract theology. They see the divine in the careful grain of the wood they carve, in the tensile strength of the iron they forge, in the deep, rich colours of the dyes they mix. The book is giving them a new way to see their work, to see the divine in the very act of creation. It is a powerful, liberating idea, and it is spreading like a quiet, invisible stain through the workshops and guilds of Northern Europe. This is a point of open, scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the spread of the book's ideas was a direct intentional campaign or a more organic, decentralised process. Some argue that the underground network was a highly organised, deliberate movement, with a clear chain of command and a coordinated plan for spreading the heresy. They point to the standardised bindings and the discrete delivery methods as evidence of a grand plan. Others, however, believe the book's journey was more of a happy accident, a series of chance encounters and spontaneous decisions by individuals who were drawn to its message for their own reasons. They argue that the book's ideas were simply so potent and so perfectly suited to the intellectual climate of the time that they spread on their own, finding fertile ground wherever they landed. The journey is long and perilous. Storms rage, pirates lurk in the shadows, and every port is a potential trap. Alessio is a bundle of nerves. He has made this journey 100 times, but this time he feels like he's carrying a live grenade. He can't shake the image of Martino's execution from his mind. He has to remind himself constantly that he is just a transporter, a simple businessman, but the fear gnaws at him. He is constantly checking the cargo, making sure the seals on the crate are intact and no one has gotten to it. You almost feel a little sorry for him. He's in way over his head, a simple man caught in a grand spiritual drama he doesn't understand. Finally, after weeks at sea, the ship arrives in Bruges. Alessio breathes a deep sigh of relief. He makes his way through the bustling streets, past the grand guild hall and the stately homes of the merchants, to a small, unassuming bookseller's shop. He hands over the crate, accepts his final payment, and walks away a free man. He doesn't look back. He has no idea what happens next, and he doesn't want to know. He's out of the game. But the book is not. The bookseller, a quiet, scholarly woman named Alara, takes the crate to a hidden room in the back of her shop. She has been waiting for this shipment for months. She opens the crate, and her eyes, which are usually so reserved and cautious, light up with a quiet fire. The books are not for sale. They are for a secret network of scholars, artists and craftsmen who are waiting for them. The book's journey has only just begun. It has left the world of open heresy and entered the world of quiet subversion. It is no longer a tool of public rebellion, but a private, personal guide to a new kind of spiritual freedom. And its influence now will be felt not in the public square, but in the private thoughts and secret hearts of those who dare to read it. The first pyre was a warning, but this quiet, furtive exchange of dangerous ideas is the true threat. The fire has gone underground. The crate is gone, the merchant is long since departed, and you find yourself in the back room of a Bruges bookshop, the air smelling of aged paper and dried ink. The bookseller, Alara, carefully unwraps the 3 copies of the forbidden text. She places them on a heavy oak table, and you see the quiet reverence in her hands. She's not a scribe, but a guardian, a librarian of the dangerous and the subversive. This is her purpose, and this shop, with its quaint facade and unassuming clientele, is merely a front for a secret society that stretches across Europe. This is a mainstream historical fact, a kind of intellectual resistance, a network of scholars and mystics, often existed in the shadows, sharing forbidden ideas and texts. They were the intellectual counterculture of their day, a decentralized university of the heretical. They communicated through coded letters, secret signs, and a network of trusted couriers, their lives bound by the shared danger and the shared belief in the power of knowledge. Alara is the local hub of this network. The books are not for her alone. She has a list, a carefully curated ledger of names and locations. The books are destined for a professor in Paris, a philosopher in Florence, and an alchemist in Prague. The book is now a tool, a scholarly instrument, and a source of inspiration for minds far more complex than a simple merchant or a pious servant. It is no longer just a dangerous secret. It is a catalyst for new ways of thinking. The book's ideas are now being explored in a new context. The original claim that the divine is an immanent force is being interpreted by these scholars in terms of Neoplatonism and Hermeticism. They see the book not as a break from tradition, but as a synthesis of ancient wisdom and Christian thought. They are using its ideas to argue that the universe is a living, breathing thing, an interconnected web of energies and spiritual forces. This is where the book's influence truly began to take root in the European intellectual landscape. It was adopted and adapted by people who were already looking for a new spiritual and philosophical framework, people who were already on the fringes of acceptable thought. One of the more quirky tidbits about this secret society is their use of a specific, almost comically elaborate code for their letters. They didn't just use a simple cipher. They would write their letters entirely in what appeared to be a tedious series of recipes for exotic soups and stews. The ingredients and their quantities were the code. For example, a reference to 3 measures of dragon's blood might mean 3 copies of the forbidden book. It was a clever, almost absurd method of communication that was perfect for a time when anyone could be a spy. It was the original "I am going to get soup, do you want soup" message, a bit like a modern-day covert text conversation. It was just elaborate enough to be safe, but also so utterly ridiculous that it was a constant source of amusement for the members of the society. This is a point of open, scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether this network was a single, unified society with a clear mission, or if it was a looser, more informal collection of like-minded individuals who simply happened to be in contact with each other. Some scholars point to the standardized book designs and the use of the shared soup code as evidence of a highly organized, cohesive group. They argue that this was the beginning of a true intellectual underground, a powerful force that would later influence the Reformation and the Renaissance. Others believe it was much more fluid, a series of individual relationships that were tied together by a shared interest in forbidden knowledge. They argue that the so-called society was more of a web than a single, coherent body, and that its influence was more a product of chance than design. The truth is likely somewhere in the middle, a web of relationships that solidified over time into something more structured. The books are passed from hand to hand, from the bookseller in Bruges to a courier who travels along the trade routes, hiding the books in false-bottomed trunks or among stacks of less suspicious texts. They make their way to Paris, where the professor, an elderly man with a quiet, penetrating mind, incorporates the book's ideas into his lectures, cloaking them in dense philosophical language that is just vague enough to avoid suspicion. They make their way to Florence, where the philosopher, a young, brilliant man, uses the book to argue for a new kind of humanism, one where man is not just a flawed creature in need of salvation, but a divine being with the power to shape his own destiny. And they make their way to Prague, where the alchemist, a reclusive and paranoid man, uses the book to justify his search for the philosopher's stone, believing that the divine spark within all things can be purified and perfected. The book is now a chameleon. It changes its form and its meaning depending on who is holding it. To the professor, it's a philosophical text. To the philosopher, it's a guide to human potential. To the alchemist, it's a key to unlocking the secrets of the universe. It is no longer a single, coherent book, but a source book for 100 different heresies, and it is spreading in a way that is far more dangerous than any single public declaration could be. It is infecting the minds of the people who are shaping the intellectual landscape of Europe. You feel a sense of unease. The violence of the past seems simple compared to this quiet, insidious spread. A single fire can be extinguished, but how do you fight an idea that is constantly changing its form? How do you stop a wildfire when it is burning not through a forest but through the very air? The Church, with its grand public trials and its elaborate rituals, is fighting a war that is a century out of date. It is still looking for heretics to burn, but the heretics have gone underground. They are no longer isolated individuals. They are a network, a living, breathing organism of defiance. The last of the 3 books is wrapped and prepared for its final journey to Prague. You watch as Ilara hands it to a new courier, a young, earnest-looking man with a large sack over his shoulder. He nods, takes the book, and disappears into the bustling streets of Bruges. The books are gone, but the ideas they carried are now a part of the world. They will take root, they will blossom, and they will produce new, dangerous fruit. The journey continues, and the stakes, somehow, feel even higher. The air in the monastery is thick with the scent of old books and beeswax. You are now in a new setting, a quiet, cloistered world seemingly untouched by the heretical current swirling outside. But even here, in the heart of what should be unshakable faith, the forbidden ideas find a way in. Your focus is on a man named Brother Julian, a kind-faced scholarly monk with a quiet demeanour and a secret obsession. He's been living in this Benedictine monastery in rural France for 30 years, and for most of that time, his life has been a peaceful rhythm of prayer, study, and the meticulous copying of authorised texts. But a few months ago, a travelling merchant, the kind that carries both religious relics and worldly goods, sold him a small, tattered fragment of an unknown manuscript. It was just a single page, but the words on it were unlike anything he had ever read. They were a whisper of a different kind of faith, one that didn't require priests or rituals, a faith that was a direct personal experience. The fragment came from the forbidden book, a page that had been torn out and sold by a panicked owner during one of the inquisitorial purges. The words on the page spoke of the divine spark within every person, a radical idea that resonated deeply with Julian. For years he had been struggling with his own faith, feeling a growing emptiness in the rigid, repetitive rituals of the monastic life. The book's words were a revelation, a confirmation of a truth he had long felt but had never been able to articulate. He realised that the quiet, solitary moments of contemplation in his cell, the simple joy he found in tending the monastery garden, were in fact a form of direct communion with God. He saw that the world was not just a stage for God's will, but God's will itself, a living, breathing testament to the divine. This is a mainstream historical fact. The quiet moments of spiritual doubt and rebellion in the monastic orders were far more common than history often records. Many monks and friars, who were highly educated and had access to a vast range of texts, often developed their own unorthodox spiritual views. Some of the most radical ideas of the Renaissance and Reformation began not with firebrand street preachers, but with quiet, thoughtful men in secluded monasteries who had the luxury of time and the intellectual freedom to explore new ideas. They were the original armchair rebels, if you will. Julian's obsession begins to grow. He becomes a scholar of a single page, an intellectual detective trying to piece together a puzzle with only one piece. He spends his days in the monastery library, not just copying texts, but searching for any reference, any mention of the book or its ideas. He starts to talk to other monks, subtly at first, trying to gauge their interest in more mystical or unconventional spiritual ideas. He is walking on a razor's edge. Heresy is a grave sin, and in the closed, isolated world of the monastery, a single accusation could lead to a quick trial and a slow, agonizing death. One of the more quirky tidbits from the story is how Julian began to identify other potential readers. He noticed that some of the monks, when they copied psalms or other religious texts, would subtly alter the illuminations in the margins. Instead of drawing traditional religious symbols, they would draw strange interlocking geometric patterns or bizarre, almost alien-looking flowers. Julian, a keen observer, realized this was a kind of a silent language, a secret code of intellectual dissidence. He started adding his own secret symbols to his work, a small stylized rose with an extra petal, or a bird with an unusually long beak. It was a kind of spiritual graffiti, a way of communicating with other like-minded individuals in a world where open conversation was impossible. It was a beautiful, small act of defiance. This is a point of open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether these underground monastic networks were truly a part of a larger heretical movement, or if they were simply isolated, internal disagreements, a kind of scholarly infighting that had little impact on the world outside the monastery walls. Some scholars believe that these small acts of rebellion were the first whispers of the Reformation, the beginning of a profound shift in thinking that would eventually lead to the Protestant break with the Catholic Church. They argue that the spread of ideas was much more organic and decentralized than previously thought, with countless small acts of defiance adding up to a tidal wave of change. Others argue that these monastic heresies were a dead end, a series of isolated sparks that never caught fire, and that the true revolution was driven by political and economic forces, not spiritual ones. The truth, as always, is probably a mix of both. Julian's obsession, however, is not a dead end. It consumes him. He realizes that he cannot find the answers he seeks within the monastery walls. He makes a decision that will change his life forever. He decides to leave the monastery, to become a heretic in the world, not just in his heart. It is a terrifying choice. Leaving the monastery is not just a change of address. It is a profound break with his past, his identity, and his security. It is a one-way ticket to a life on the run. He packs a small bag, takes the tattered fragment of the book, and slips out of the monastery in the dead of night, a ghostly figure in the consuming dark. He sheds his monastic robes and adopts the plain clothes of a travelling scholar. His goal is simple and terrifyingly ambitious, to find a complete copy of the forbidden book. He has no idea where to look. He has no money, no contacts, and no plan. He is a man driven by a desperate hunger for knowledge, a man who has traded a life of comfort and security for a life of danger and uncertainty. He becomes a manuscript hunter, a ghost that haunts the dusty libraries and cluttered bookshops of Europe. He uses the symbols he learned from the margins of the manuscripts to identify other members of the network. He travels from town to town, city to city, following the rumours and whispers of forbidden texts. He's looking for a book, but he's really looking for a spiritual home, a community of like-minded individuals who see the world as he does. He's no longer a monk, but he is a seeker, a pilgrim on a journey to a truth that is far more dangerous than any heresy. He's a single, solitary figure in a vast, dangerous world, and his search will lead him to places he never could have imagined. His journey is a testament to the power of a single idea, a single fragment of a book, to upend a life and send a man on a perilous path to a new kind of freedom. Julian, the former monk, is a shadow among the bookstalls of a German town, his face drawn with the hunger of a man who has traded bread for knowledge. He's been on the road for months, following whispers and rumours, a manuscript hunter in a world on the cusp of a revolution. You're with him, a ghost at his shoulder, watching as he sifts through stacks of pamphlets and books, his trained eye looking for the subtle signs of the underground network. He has a new goal now, a new hope. He has heard a rumour of a new machine, a device that can reproduce a book in a matter of days, not months. A machine that could make a single forbidden book 100, 1,000 books. This is a mainstream historical fact, the Gutenberg printing press. Its invention in the mid-15th century was one of the single most important events in human history. It fundamentally changed the way information was created, distributed, and consumed. Before the press, a book was a rare and precious object, painstakingly copied by hand. After the press, a book became a commodity, something that could be mass-produced and sold to anyone who could afford it. For the church, it was a terrifying development. It meant they could no longer control the flow of information. They could no longer burn a book and be certain that it was gone forever. They could no longer rely on the slow, meticulous work of scribes to keep a check on what was being read. The printing press was the true heretic. Julian has a new lead, a tip from a fellow traveller that leads him to a small, unassuming print shop in a town on the banks of the Rhine. He's been told that the printer, a man named Matthias, is not just a craftsman, but a kind of revolutionary, a man who believes that knowledge should be free for all. You can feel the tension in the air as they approach the shop. The air smells of ink and metal, a strange new scent that is completely alien to the world of vellum and quill. Inside, the shop is a world of gears and levers and heavy wooden presses. It's loud and chaotic, a far cry from the quiet solemnity of a scriptorium. Matthias, a burly bearded man with ink-stained hands, greets Julian with a nod. He knows why Julian is here. The message was passed through the network, from a bookseller in Bruges to a merchant on the Rhine, to a scholar in a university town, and finally to Julian. The conversation is in whispers. Julian explains what he's looking for, a complete copy of the forbidden book. Matthias shakes his head. I don't have a copy, but I know who does. I can get one. He tells Julian that the book's ideas have been circulating in the printing world for a while now. The printers, a community of craftsmen who were always on the fringes of society, were fascinated by the book's ideas. They saw themselves as the new apostles, spreading the word of God not with sermons, but with ink and metal. The book's core belief, that the divine is a kind of energy that permeates everything, spoke to them on a very personal level. They saw the act of printing, the process of turning a blank sheet of paper into a page of living, breathing words, as a kind of divine alchemy. This is a point of open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the printers of the time were truly motivated by a desire to spread heresy, or if they were simply pragmatic businessmen who saw a market for new and controversial ideas. Some scholars believe that the printers were a key part of the heretical movement, a kind of revolutionary force that used technology to subvert the church's authority. They point to the fact that many of the first books to be printed were Bibles in the vernacular, a direct challenge to the church's monopoly on scripture. Others argue that the printers were simply responding to consumer demand, and that their role in the Reformation was a happy accident, not a deliberate conspiracy. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in the middle. They were both. They were businessmen and they were believers, a perfect storm of pragmatism and idealism. One of the more quirky tidbits about this period is the way printers would mark their books. It wasn't just about a logo or a name. Printers of heretical texts would often include a tiny, almost invisible imperfection in the printed pages, a small smudge of ink or a misaligned letter that was unique to their press. It was a kind of a digital watermark, a signature that could be used to identify a book as a legitimate copy from the underground network, and not a forgery created by the Inquisition to lure heretics out of hiding. It was a brilliant, almost modern idea, a testament to the ingenuity and paranoia of the people who were risking their lives to spread forbidden knowledge. Matthias gets a copy of the book. It's a plain, unassuming volume, but Julian can feel the weight of it in his hands. It is the culmination of his journey, the final piece of the puzzle. He sits in a quiet corner of the print shop, the sound of the press a rhythmic beat in the background, and he begins to read. He doesn't just read the words, he feels them. He feels the truth that he has been searching for, the truth that the divine is not a distant, judging king, but a loving, immanent presence. He feels a sense of peace that he has not felt in years. The book is not just a text, it is a spiritual homecoming. He spends the next few days in the shop, helping Matthias set type, learning the process of printing. He realizes that the machine is a more powerful tool than any quill and vellum. It is a tool for mass liberation. He decides that he will not just read the book. He will help to spread it. He will become a part of the printing revolution. He is no longer a solitary seeker, but an active participant in a movement that will change the world forever. The world outside the shop is still full of darkness and fear, but inside there is a quiet, rhythmic hum of progress. Every click of the press, every pull of the lever, is a tiny act of rebellion. It is a whisper that will one day become a roar. The book, once a rare and precious object, is now 1,000 copies, 1,000 whispered heresies, 1,000 tiny sparks waiting to ignite a world. Julian, the former monk, is a new man. He's no longer a solitary scholar, but a printer's apprentice, his hands stained with ink, his mind humming with the rhythmic clatter of the printing press. He spends his days setting type. The tiny metal letters a kind of sacred geometry, each one a building block of a new world. The forbidden book is now a printed reality. 100 copies, then 200, then 500, each one a tiny spark of rebellion. The print shop, once a place of mundane commerce, has become a hotbed of intellectual ferment, a secret factory for the future. You are there with him, feeling the cool metal of the type, smelling the sharp scent of the ink, watching as the pages come alive with the words that got Martino burned. The books are not sold in public. They are smuggled out in barrels of flour, in false-bottomed wagons, in the satchels of travelling merchants and students. The network has found a new, more efficient way to spread its message. The church, however, is not a monolith. It is a slow, ponderous institution, but it is not blind. The new wave of heresies, the pamphlets and books that are circulating in the vernacular, are a new kind of threat, one that they don't yet know how to fight. The Inquisition, with its public trials and its slow, grinding bureaucracy, is a tool for a different kind of war. This new war is a war of ideas, and it is moving at the speed of a printing press. The first to see the true danger is not a clergyman, but a king, a young, ambitious monarch who is trying to consolidate his power and sees the church as his most useful tool for social control. King Philip IV of France is a man of ruthless pragmatism. He is a mainstream historical fact, a king who was instrumental in the suppression of the Knights Templar and who was a constant thorn in the side of the papacy. He understands that a challenge to the church's authority is a challenge to his own. He is not interested in theology, he is interested in power. He sees the flood of new ideas as a threat to the social order, a kind of intellectual plague that must be contained at all costs. He receives a report from his spies that a new, particularly insidious book is circulating, a book that teaches that every man is his own priest, a book that subverts both the authority of the church and the king. He is not a man to wait for the church to act. He acts first. He issues a royal decree, a sweeping, brutal order that sends his soldiers and his agents of the law into the streets. The decree is simple and absolute. Any person found with a copy of the forbidden book is to be arrested on the spot, and the book itself is to be burned immediately. It is a desperate measure, a last-ditch effort to contain a flood that is already beyond containment. The soldiers, most of whom are illiterate and have no idea what they are looking for, simply start seizing any book that looks suspicious. The hunt is on, and the streets are full of fear. This is a point of open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether King Philip's actions were an effective, if brutal, strategy, or if they were a counterproductive blunder that only served to make the book more famous and more desirable. Some scholars argue that the royal decree and the subsequent public burnings of books created a new kind of martyr. People who were burned for owning a book became symbols of defiance, and the forbidden book became a kind of sacred object, a testament to the truth that was worth dying for. They argue that the king's actions, far from stopping the spread of the heresy, only accelerated it, turning a quiet intellectual movement into a public political one. Others argue that the king's actions were a necessary evil, a ruthless but effective way of sending a clear message to the population that dissent would not be tolerated. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in the middle. The decree was both a desperate act and a public relations disaster, a testament to the old world's inability to cope with a new kind of threat. One of the more quirky tidbits from this period is the way the underground network adapted. They began to produce the books in smaller, more easily hidden formats. They would print individual chapters, or even just single pages, and sell them separately. A person could own the entire book without ever having a complete single volume in their possession. It was a brilliant decentralized way of spreading the ideas. A person could have a page on the nature of the soul, a friend could have a page on the nature of sin, and the two could piece together the book in their minds without ever having to risk having a complete copy in their homes. It was a kind of spiritual peer-to-peer sharing, a testament to the ingenuity of the human mind when it is trying to outwit a powerful, oppressive force. Julian is in the middle of this chaos. He and Matthias are forced to close their shop to hide their press and to go underground. The rhythmic clatter of the press is replaced by the panicked silence of a world under siege. He has to watch as his friends and colleagues are arrested, as the books he so lovingly created are tossed into bonfires in the middle of town squares. The intellectual fire he helped to start is now a literal fire, and it is burning his world to the ground. He sees the fear in people's eyes, the quiet desperation as they try to hide their books, their ideas, their very thoughts. He realizes that the struggle is not just an intellectual one anymore. It is a struggle for survival. Julian and Matthias manage to escape, but they are no longer in a position to print books. They are fugitives on the run, their mission a failure. Or is it? As they make their way out of the city, they see a young boy, a simple street urchin, with a small folded piece of paper in his hand. The boy is reading it, his lips moving as he sounds out the words. Julian and Matthias look at each other, a shared realization dawning on their faces. The boy is reading a page from the forbidden book. The decree, the burnings, the fear, none of it mattered. The books were already out there. The ideas were already in the minds of the people. The fire had already spread, and it was now too late to put it out. The royal decree was not the end of the book's journey. It was just a new chapter. The fire had gone from the pyre to the printing press, and now it was in the hands of the common people. The king's decree has turned the country into a hunting ground. Julian and Matthias, now fugitives, can only watch from the shadows as the flames of book burnings light up the night sky. The rhythmic clatter of the printing press has been replaced by the heavy tread of soldiers' boots and the terrified whispers of the people. But the king's men are not finding all the books. The underground network, in its brilliant decentralization, has already outsmarted them. The books are hidden in barns, buried in fields, and smuggled out of the cities in carts of hay and sacks of grain. The king is fighting a ghost, and he doesn't even know it. You find yourself in a new setting, a vast and quiet library in a cathedral city, a place of hushed tones and heavy oak tables. The air here smells of leather and dust, and the light, filtered through stained glass windows, is a reverent hush. Your focus is on a man named Brother Thomas, a censor, an official of the church whose job it is to read and evaluate books for heresy. He is a man of incredible learning and an unshakable faith, a scholar who has dedicated his life to the defence of the church. He sees himself not as a jailer of ideas, but as a shepherd, protecting his flock from the wolves of false doctrine. He is not like the Inquisitor, Father Anselm, who was driven by blind faith and a thirst for power. Thomas is a man of intellectual honesty, a man who believes that the best way to fight heresy is to understand it. He has been given a task to read and evaluate a captured copy of the Forbidden Book. This is a mainstream historical fact. The Church's response to the new intellectual currents of the Renaissance and Reformation was not just brutal suppression, it was also intellectual engagement. The Church established committees of censors and scholars whose job it was to read and refute heretical texts, to counter them not just with fire and sword, but with argument and logic. They were the intellectual special forces of their day. Thomas begins to read the book, a copy that was confiscated from a scholar in Paris. He reads slowly, meticulously, a sharp-tipped knife resting on the table beside him. He is supposed to read the book, mark the heretical passages, and then have it destroyed. But as he reads, something strange happens. He is not just reading the book, he is being drawn into it. The elegant, simple logic of its arguments, the sheer beauty of its prose, begins to resonate with him. He finds himself nodding at some of the passages, agreeing with the author's subtle criticisms of the Church's bureaucracy and its over-reliance on dogma. He too has felt that quiet, nagging emptiness in the rigid rituals of the faith. The book's central idea, that the divine is an immanent force, a kind of cosmic hum that permeates everything, speaks to him on a very personal level. He has always found God in the quiet moments of contemplation, in the natural world, in the quiet wisdom of the great philosophers he has studied. He realizes that the book is not a work of evil, but a work of profound spiritual yearning, a desperate attempt to find God in a world that seems to have lost its way. He is faced with a terrible choice. He can follow his orders, mark the book for destruction, and go on with his life as a loyal servant of the Church, or he can do what his conscience tells him and save the book, at least a part of it. This is a point of open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the church's censors were genuinely loyal servants of the institution, or if they were a kind of Trojan horse, a secret network of intellectual dissidents who were using their position to save and preserve forbidden texts. Some scholars believe that many of the censors, like Thomas, were deeply conflicted men who used their position to secretly rescue important works from destruction, or to at least preserve their core ideas by writing about them in their own sanctioned works. Others argue that this is a romantic notion, and that the censors were, by and large, ruthless and effective agents of the church's authority. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in the middle, but the fact that the debate exists at all speaks to the complicated human side of this intellectual war. One of the more quirky tidbits from this part of the story is what Thomas decides to do. He can't save the entire book. He would be discovered immediately. Instead, he decides to save the ideas. He begins a meticulous process of redaction, not to destroy the text, but to save it. He uses his sharp-tipped knife to carefully cut out individual words and phrases, a kind of scholarly censorship. He doesn't cut out the core ideas, but he cuts out the parts that make the book explicitly heretical. He removes the direct challenges to the Pope's authority, the explicit criticisms of the Church. He leaves the rest, the beautiful passages on the nature of the soul, the direct connection to the divine, the poetic descriptions of God in the natural world. He is creating a new book, a redacted version, a sanitized heresy that can survive. It's an almost perfect metaphor for the way ideas live on. Even when you try to destroy them, they find a way to adapt and survive. Thomas finishes his work. The book is a series of silent blank spaces where the most dangerous words once were. He has saved the book's heart, but he has stripped it of its teeth. The redacted version is then presented to the local inquisitor, who, being a less than thorough man, sees that the book has been censored and is therefore safe. He allows it to be placed in a secluded part of the library, a dead text that no one will ever read. He thinks he has won. But what he doesn't know is that Thomas has memorized every word he cut out. He is now a living library of a forbidden text, a secret repository of dangerous knowledge. He has saved the book by internalizing it. The book is now safe, or at least a version of it is. The ideas are no longer just on the page. They are in a man's mind, a man who will one day, in a moment of quiet rebellion, pass them on to someone else. The censor's knife was not a tool of destruction, but a tool of preservation. The fire has gone from the printing press to the mind, and it is now 100 times more dangerous. You feel a sense of unease. The violence of the past seems so simple and straightforward compared to this quiet, subtle act of intellectual subversion. It's a reminder that the most dangerous battles are not fought with swords, but with ideas, and the most dangerous place to hide a secret is in plain sight. The redacted copy of the forbidden book sits in a dusty corner of the cathedral library, a ghost of its former self. Brother Thomas, the censor who saved it by destroying it, carries its true words in his mind, a living library of heresy. But the book's journey is far from over. The King's Purge has a counter-effect. It has not eliminated the heresy. It has simply driven it deeper underground, forcing the network of believers to become more creative, more resilient, and far more connected. You are now in a new world, a world of secret signs and quiet meetings, of hidden libraries and coded conversations. It is a world that exists in the shadows, a parallel universe of defiance. You find yourself in a bustling port city, a hub of commerce and intellectual exchange. The air smells of fish and salt and the promise of 100 different cultures mingling in the streets. You're with a woman named Isabella, a wealthy merchant's wife who seems, on the surface, to be a devout and pious lady of the city's high society. She attends Mass, gives generously to the church, and hosts elegant dinner parties where the conversation is always about the weather or the latest fashions. But beneath this placid surface, she is a crucial node in the heretics' network. She's a book smuggler, a librarian, and a quiet revolutionary. This is a mainstream historical fact. Women, especially wealthy women, played a crucial and often overlooked role in the spread of heretical ideas during the Middle Ages and Renaissance. Their private lives and their homes were often outside the direct reach of the inquisitors, and they could use their social connections and their money to acquire forbidden texts and to host secret meetings. They were the silent architects of the intellectual revolution, using the very structures of power that oppressed them to subvert that power. They were the quiet operators, the social butterflies who were also venomous spiders, and no one ever suspected them. Isabella's home is a marvel of secret passages and hidden compartments. The walls are not just stone and plaster, they're a network of secret shelves and cubbies. The floorboards are not just wood, they're a system of trapdoors and false bottoms. She has a collection of books that would make any inquisitor weak in the knees. They are hidden behind tapestries, in the back of her grand fireplace, even inside the hollowed-out legs of her large dining table. It's an elaborate and beautiful system of intellectual resistance, and she manages it with the quiet confidence of a woman who knows what she's doing. She's a professional, a master of her craft, a quiet, brilliant spy in her own home. One of the more quirky tidbits from this part of the story is how the network communicated. They didn't just use coded letters, they also used a kind of spiritual language, a system of gestures and subtle facial expressions that only the initiated could understand. For example, a person might rub their thumb and forefinger together in a circular motion, a sign that meant the divine is in all things. Or they might hold their hands palms up, a gesture that meant we're all channels for the divine. It was a silent, beautiful language that allowed them to communicate their shared beliefs in a crowded room without anyone else being the wiser. It was a kind of spiritual telepathy, a testament to the quiet, desperate need for connection in a world where it was too dangerous to speak. It reminds you of a time when people would communicate through subtle glances and coded nods, a more elegant form of communication than a modern-day text message. This is a point of open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether these secret societies and networks were truly effective in spreading their ideas, or if they were a kind of elaborate security blanket for people who were already believers. Some scholars argue that the network was a key part of the intellectual revolution, a kind of heretical version of the Silk Road, a system that allowed ideas to flow freely in a world that wanted to contain them. Others argue that the network was too small, too decentralized, and too paranoid to have a real impact, and that the true change came from larger, more public forces like the printing press and the political ambitions of kings. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in the middle. The network was both a lifeline for the heretics and a source of inspiration for a larger, more public movement. It was a single thread in a vast tapestry of change. Isabella is now hosting a small meeting, a gathering of fellow believers in her hidden, soundproofed library. They are not firebrands or revolutionaries. They are a baker, a doctor, a stonemason, and a weaver, all people from different walks of life who are united by the ideas of the forbidden book. They read from a copy of the book, one that she had smuggled in from a contact in Bruges. They discuss its ideas, not as abstract theology, but as a practical guide for living. The baker talks about finding the divine in the process of making bread. The doctor talks about finding the divine in the human body. The stonemason talks about finding the divine in the rock he carves. The forbidden book is no longer just a text. It is a philosophy of everyday life, a practical guide to living a spiritual existence in a world that is trying to tell you that spirituality is only for priests. The meeting is a beautiful, quiet moment of rebellion. The fear and anxiety of the world outside seem to vanish in the hushed, candlelit room. The group is no longer just a collection of individuals. They are a community, a living embodiment of the book's ideas. They are the new church, the new priesthood, and their sanctuary is a secret room in a wealthy woman's home. The king's decree, the inquisitor's fire, and the censor's knife, none of it matters. The book's ideas have found a new home, a home that is 1,000 times more secure than any library or printing press. They are in the minds and hearts of the people, and there is no fire that can burn them out. The air in the Vatican Library is heavy with the scent of old paper, leather, and the quiet weight of a millennium of power and knowledge. You're in Rome now, a city of grand monuments and hidden shadows, a city where the past is a constant living presence. You're no longer with the heretics or the scholars. You're with a spy, a man named Lorenzo. He is an agent of the Florentine Republic, a city-state that, in a complex game of political chess, has found itself at odds with the Papal States. Lorenzo's mission is simple: to find a copy of the forbidden book. He has been told by his superiors that the book contains not just heretical ideas, but political ones, a blueprint for a new kind of society where a powerful aristocracy of scholars and merchants would replace the old order of kings and popes. This is a mainstream historical fact. The conflict between the Italian city-states and the papacy was a constant source of political intrigue, and both sides used spies and agents to gain a political advantage. The war of ideas was often an extension of a very real and very physical war for power and influence. Lorenzo is not a believer, and he is not a heretic. He is a pragmatist. He is a professional. He sees the forbidden book not as a spiritual text, but as a weapon. He has been given a unique opportunity. He is here, in the heart of the enemy's intellectual fortress, under the guise of an art historian sent to catalogue a collection of ancient maps. He is a ghost in the system, a man who knows how to blend in, how to be invisible in a room full of people. He moves through the long, vaulted corridors of the library with the quiet grace of a predator, his eyes scanning the shelves, his mind a steel trap of information. He has a lead. He has been told that the Vatican has a secret collection, a libreria segreta, of books deemed too dangerous to be in the main collection, but too important to be destroyed. This is a point of open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the Vatican's secret libraries were truly a treasure trove of forbidden knowledge, or if they were simply a collection of mundane documents that were kept private for security reasons. Some scholars believe that the secret library was a conscious effort by the Church to preserve the very heresies it was trying to stamp out, a kind of morbid curiosity. They argue that the Church was fascinated by its own enemies, and that it wanted to keep them close, so it could study and understand them. Others argue that this is a conspiracy theory, and that the library was simply a repository for sensitive documents and diplomatic correspondence. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in the middle, but the idea of a secret library of forbidden knowledge is a powerful and enduring one, and it is a myth that people like Lorenzo are more than willing to believe. Lorenzo's search is a tedious, painstaking process. He spends his days cataloguing maps and his nights, when the library is empty, searching for the hidden collection. He's an artist of stealth, a master of misdirection. He uses a small, hand-drawn map that was given to him by a contact in the Florentine network, a map that shows a series of secret passages and hidden rooms within the library. He is a pilgrim on a quest for a different kind of Holy Grail, not the Cup of Christ, but a book of words. One of the more quirky tidbits from this part of the story is the way Lorenzo uses a series of almost comically mundane items to get around the library's security. He uses a series of carefully placed small stones on the floor to mark his path so he can find his way back in the dark. He uses a small mirror to check for hidden tripwires or alarms. He even has a small custom-made hook that he uses to open a latch on a hidden door that is just out of his reach. It's a bit like a medieval version of a James Bond film, but instead of gadgets for killing people, his gadgets are for looking at books. It's a funny, human detail that makes the story feel more real. Finally, after weeks of searching, he finds it. He finds the secret library. It's a small, unmarked door in a forgotten corner of the library, hidden behind a large tapestry of a minor saint. He uses his custom-made hook to open the latch, and he slips inside. The air is cold and still, and the room is full of books, all of them bound in plain, unmarked leather, all of them silent, dangerous secrets. He is a man who has found a treasure beyond his wildest dreams. He scans the shelves, his heart pounding in his chest, looking for a book that matches the description he was given, a plain, leather-bound volume with a small, stylized serpent on the spine. He finds it. He reaches for it, his fingers brushing against the cold leather. This is it. This is the book he came for. He has it. He has won. But as he reaches for it, a sound echoes from the other side of the room. It's a quiet click, a latch. Lorenzo, a man of quick reflexes and a healthy sense of paranoia, ducks behind a tall bookshelf. He peers out from the shadows. A man is standing in the room, a shadowy figure with a single candle in his hand. It's not a guard. It's Brother Thomas, the censor. Thomas looks at the book Lorenzo was about to take and he shakes his head, a look of profound disappointment on his face. He knows what the book is, and he knows what Lorenzo is. He doesn't say anything. He just turns and walks away, a ghost in the shadows. Lorenzo is frozen. He has been seen. He has been discovered. But the man didn't call for a guard. He just left. Lorenzo, his mind racing, realizes something. The man didn't want him to take the book. The man knew what the book was, and he didn't want it to fall into the wrong hands. Lorenzo has been outsmarted. The man, the censor, was not an enemy. He was a guardian. He was a protector of the very heresy he was supposed to be stamping out. Lorenzo, a professional spy, is faced with an impossible choice. Does he take the book and complete his mission, or does he leave it? A testament to the fact that not all battles are a simple matter of good and evil. He thinks about the man's face, the look of profound sadness. He thinks about the words he has heard about the book, the words of freedom and hope. He makes a decision. He leaves the book on the shelf, a silent, beautiful sacrifice. He will tell his superiors that he could not find it. The book is safe, for now. But Lorenzo, the pragmatic spy, has been changed. He has learned that some things are more valuable than political power, and that some battles are fought not with swords, but with quiet, profound acts of defiance. Lorenzo, the spy, has left the Vatican Library, his mission unfulfilled but his mind changed. The forbidden book remains hidden in the secret collection, a silent testament to the complicated nature of belief and defiance. But the book's ideas are not contained. They are still out there, spreading like a rumour, finding new voices and new vessels. You're no longer in Rome, but in a quiet, isolated villa on the outskirts of Florence. The air here is still and warm, smelling of cypress and wild rosemary. Your focus is on a man named Giovanni, a scholar who has spent his entire life in the shadows of the academy. He's not a heretic, or a spy, or a revolutionary. He's a linguist, a translator, a man who has dedicated his life to the forgotten languages of the ancient world. Giovanni is an expert in the translation of ancient texts, a skill that is both highly prized and deeply suspicious. The Church, and the state that serves it, is wary of men who can read and understand the ancient world, for the ancient world was full of pagan ideas and philosophies that were a direct challenge to the Christian order. This is a mainstream historical fact. The Renaissance was, in large part, a rediscovery of ancient Greek and Roman texts, and this rediscovery often brought with it a host of new and sometimes heretical ideas that challenged the established order. The scholars of the time, the humanists, were the intellectual engine of this revolution, and men like Giovanni were its gears. Giovanni has been approached by a shadowy figure, a member of the heretics' underground network who has heard of his legendary skills. The man has brought him a tattered, almost illegible copy of the Forbidden Book, a copy that has been translated from the original Italian into a kind of scholarly Latin, but a Latin that is full of complex academic jargon and obscure philosophical terms. The man tells Giovanni that the book is an ancient Hermetic text, a work of forgotten wisdom that needs to be translated into the common language of the people, the Tuscan dialect of Italian. He doesn't tell Giovanni that the book is a heresy. He presents it as a work of profound scholarly importance, a key to a new understanding of the universe. Giovanni, a man driven by a profound and almost childlike curiosity, agrees to the task. He's not interested in the book's spiritual or political content. He's interested in the puzzle, the intellectual challenge of translating a complex and difficult text. He begins his work in the quiet solitude of his study. The only sounds the scratching of his quill and the turning of pages. As he translates, something strange happens. The words, which at first seemed like a dry academic exercise, begin to take on a life of their own. He finds himself drawn into the book's ideas, its elegant and simple logic, its profound spiritual beauty. He is not just translating a text. He is having a conversation with a mind that is centuries old, a mind that is speaking a truth that he has long felt, but has never been able to articulate. One of the more quirky tidbits from this part of the story is how Giovanni, a man of incredible intellectual rigour, develops a kind of tic. He begins to talk to the author of the book, to argue with him, to question his ideas, and to offer his own. He is a solitary man, a man who has spent his entire life in the company of dead philosophers, and this is his first real conversation in years. He talks to the book as if it were a living person, a quiet, one-sided conversation that takes place in the solitude of his study. It's an almost comical image, a brilliant scholar arguing with a dead author in an empty room, but it is also a testament to the book's power, its ability to feel like a living, breathing thing. This is a point of open, scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the translation of heretical texts into the vernacular was a deliberate act of subversion or a more organic process driven by the intellectual curiosity of men like Giovanni. Some scholars argue that the translators were a key part of the heretical movement, a kind of linguistic fifth column that was using its skills to undermine the Church's authority from the inside. They argue that the translation of the book into the common language of the people was a key moment in the intellectual revolution, a moment when the book's ideas were no longer the sole property of a scholarly elite. Others argue that the translators were simply doing their job, and that the translation of these texts was a natural consequence of the Renaissance's emphasis on humanism and the study of ancient languages. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in the middle, but the fact that the book was now in a language that a common person could read was a game changer, a profound act of defiance that changed everything. Giovanni finishes his work. The book is now translated, a beautiful, eloquent document in the Tuscan dialect. He has not just translated the words, he has translated the ideas, and he has made them accessible to a world that was once locked out of them. He has taken a scholarly heresy and turned it into a populist one. He hands the finished manuscript to the man who hired him, and he refuses payment. The work, he tells the man, was its own reward. He is no longer just a translator. He is a believer. He has been changed by the book, and he is a part of the heretical network now, not because he chose to be, but because the book chose him. But the story is not over. The man who hired him, the shadowy figure who is a part of the network, is not a simple agent. He is a spy, a double agent who is also working for the Inquisition. He has used Giovanni's skills to get a perfect, legible, and easily understandable copy of the book, a copy that he can now present to the Church as a weapon against the heretics. He is a man who is a true Machiavellian, a man who is willing to use any means to an end. He has a plan to use the book to destroy the network from the inside, to identify and arrest its leaders, and to stamp out the heresy once and for all. He is a man who sees no difference between a book of words and a sword of steel. He will use one to destroy the other. The scholar's work, the beautiful and dangerous translation, is now a weapon in a very real and very bloody war. The fire has gone from the mind to the sword, and it is now 100 times more dangerous. The spy's betrayal, that quiet and brutal act of intellectual treason, has turned the beautiful Tuscan translation of the forbidden book into a weapon. Giovanni, the scholar, continues his work, blissfully unaware of the danger his translation now represents. The book's journey, however, has taken a new, more dangerous turn. The book itself, a product of a centuries-old intellectual tradition, is now a pawn in a modern game of political and religious power. You're no longer in Florence. You're in Alexandria, a city of ancient history and enduring myth. The air here is hot and dry, smelling of desert dust and the faint, sweet scent of the sea. Your focus is on an old man, a Coptic monk named Father Elias. He lives in a small, isolated monastery that is built on the ancient foundations of a far more famous place, the Great Library of Alexandria. This is a mainstream historical fact. Many of the ancient libraries and centres of learning were not completely destroyed, but were simply repurposed. Their remnants, their foundations, their quiet echoes, often became the building blocks for new institutions of learning and faith. The new was literally built upon the ruins of the old, a physical manifestation of the way ideas and knowledge are passed down through the ages. Father Elias is the guardian of a forgotten past, a past that still lives in the quiet, dusty rooms of his monastery. He is a part of the heretics' network, but a part that is so far removed from the political and religious squabbles of Europe that he is almost a world away. His network is not one of spies and merchants, but one of scholars and mystics who have, for centuries, been preserving the forbidden knowledge of the ancient world. He has heard whispers of the forbidden book, a book that he believes is not a heresy at all, but a fragment of a much older, more profound truth. He believes that the book's ideas, that the divine is an immanent force woven into the fabric of the universe, are a direct echo of ancient Egyptian and Coptic spiritual traditions. He believes the forbidden book is the key to unlocking the secrets of a forgotten pre-Christian past. This is a point of open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether there was a direct unbroken line of intellectual transmission from the ancient world to the heretical movements of the Middle Ages. Some scholars argue that the heretical books of the medieval period, like the one we are discussing, were a kind of spiritual and intellectual rebellion against the rigid dogma of the Church, and were in fact a rediscovery of ancient pagan and Gnostic traditions. They argue that men like Father Elias were not just rebels but also historical detectives, piecing together a forgotten past from tattered fragments and whispered rumours. Others argue that this is a romantic notion, and that the medieval heretics were simply a product of their time, a reaction to the political and religious conditions of their world, and that their ideas, while they may have resembled ancient ones, were not a direct link to the past. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in the middle. One of the more quirky tidbits from this part of the story is Father Elias's library. It is not a grand, organised collection of books, but a series of secret, interconnected tunnels and rooms that are built into the catacombs beneath the monastery. The books are not on shelves, but are hidden in small niches in the walls, wrapped in old pieces of oilcloth to protect them from the damp. He has a vast collection of texts that are considered heretical or lost by the Church, works of ancient Gnosticism, pre-Socratic philosophy, and texts from the early Christian sects that were stamped out by the mainstream Church. He is a man who is living in a museum of defiance. The very ground he walks on is a testament to the fact that ideas, no matter how much you try to bury them, will always find a way to resurface. Father Elias receives a coded message from the European network. A copy of the Forbidden Book, a newly translated version, is on its way to him. It is being smuggled in the hollowed-out spine of a large wooden crucifix, a dark irony that is not lost on anyone in the network. The book is coming to him because the network, which has been severely weakened by the spy's betrayal and the subsequent arrests, knows that Alexandria is the last safe haven for their ideas. They are sending the book to him for safekeeping, a desperate, final act of intellectual preservation. They are entrusting the future of their ideas to a man who is living in the shadow of a forgotten past. He waits for the book, and you wait with him, a quiet, tense anticipation filling the air. He knows the book is a weapon, a tool for revolution, but he sees it as a work of profound spiritual and historical importance. He sees it not just as a heresy, but as a key to a new understanding of the world. He believes that the book's ideas, when combined with the ancient wisdom of his own collection, could create a new kind of spiritual movement, one that could reconcile the past and the present, a movement that could heal the ails of a world that is torn apart by fear and dogma. He has a plan to save not just the book, but also its ideas. The book arrives. It is a small, unassuming wooden crucifix. Father Elias takes it, and in a quiet, solemn ritual he breaks it open. He takes out the book, the beautiful Tuscan translation that Giovanni so lovingly created. He holds it in his hands, his eyes full of a quiet reverence. He has a plan to save the book from the future by burying it in the past. He will not add it to his collection in the catacombs. He will place it in a small hidden chamber, a place that no one knows about, a place that has been sealed off for centuries. He will place it in the very heart of the ancient library, in a place that has been silent for 1,000 years. He will not add it to the collection. He will return it to the source. The book's journey is a circle, a return to the place from which it was born. He seals the chamber, and he walks away. The book is now a part of the past. It is safe, but it is also a secret, a ghost that lives in a forgotten tomb. The intellectual fire has been contained, but it has not been extinguished. It is sleeping, waiting for a new world to be born, a new generation to find it, a new era to discover the truth that was so dangerous it had to be buried. The book's journey is a testament to the idea that some things are too important to be lost, and that the past, no matter how much you try to bury it, will always find a way to resurface. The Forbidden Book is now a ghost in the catacombs of a Coptic monastery in Alexandria, a secret in a tomb of secrets. Its journey, however, has not ended. It has simply changed its form, a bit like a spirit that has left its body and is now free to wander. The book's ideas, which were once confined to a single manuscript and then to the minds of a few scholars, are now manifesting in new and unexpected ways. You're no longer in the dry heat of Egypt, but in the humid, artistic heart of Renaissance Italy. The air smells of wet plaster, oil paints, and the vibrant life of a city that is in the middle of a grand creative explosion. Your focus is on a man named Alessandro, an apprentice to one of the great fresco painters of the age. He is a young, earnest artist, a man who sees the world not in words but in colour and light. He is not a scholar, and he has no connection to the heretics' network. He has, however, heard the whispers. He has heard the rumours of a book that promises a new way of seeing the divine, a way that is not confined to the walls of a church or the pages of a Bible. He has heard that the divine is an immanent force, woven into the very fabric of the universe. This idea has resonated deeply with him, a man who has always felt a quiet spiritual connection to the colours he mixes and the shapes he creates. He sees God not just in the saints and the prophets, but in the subtle curve of a human face, in the delicate line of a tree branch, in the vibrant red of a sunset. This is a mainstream historical fact. The Renaissance was, in part, a spiritual and artistic rebellion against the rigid, dogmatic art of the Middle Ages. The artists of the time, the great painters and sculptors, were not just craftsmen, they were also philosophers and spiritual seekers. They used their art to explore new ideas, to challenge old assumptions, and to create a new vision of the world, one that was not just a stage for God's will, but a living, breathing testament to his glory. They were the visual heretics, and they were in many ways a far more powerful and dangerous force than any scholar or book smuggler. Alessandro is working on a new fresco for a grand cathedral, a massive painting that is meant to depict the life of a popular saint. He's a small part of a vast team, and his job is to paint the background, the subtle details that no one ever really notices. He's painting a landscape, a beautiful sprawling scene of rolling hills and a winding river, and as he paints, he begins to embed the book's ideas into his work, a silent, coded confession. He is not painting a heretical symbol or a direct challenge to the church. He is far too clever for that. He is doing something far more subtle and far more dangerous. One of the more quirky tidbits from this part of the story is the way he does it. He uses a kind of colour symbolism that is only known to a small hidden community of artists. He paints a small, perfectly rendered lizard in the corner of a landscape, a symbol that means the divine is in the lowliest of creatures. He paints a small, almost invisible crack in a stone wall, a symbol that means the truth can break through the hardest of dogmas. And in a small, hidden corner of the fresco, in the folds of the saint's robe, he paints a small, almost invisible blossoming branch with a serpent coiled around it, the very same symbol that Elias, the scribe, drew in the margins of his manuscript. It is a silent, beautiful conversation that is happening across centuries and across continents, a whisper of a shared belief that is hidden in plain sight. It's a bit like a modern-day artist hiding a QR code in a mural that links to a website with a heretical text. It's a testament to the fact that the human mind, when it is trying to communicate a forbidden idea, will always find a way. This is a point of open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the artists of the Renaissance were truly part of a heretical movement, or if they were simply using new artistic techniques to explore their own personal spiritual beliefs. Some scholars argue that the artists, like Alessandro, were a key part of the intellectual rebellion, using their art to embed heretical ideas in public spaces where they could be seen by everyone. They argue that the art of the Renaissance, with its emphasis on humanism and the beauty of the natural world, was a direct and powerful challenge to the church's authority. Others argue that the artists were simply responding to a new aesthetic, a new way of seeing the world, and that the heresies in their art were simply the product of a new, more naturalistic style. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in the middle. But the fact that the debate exists at all speaks to the power of art to be a source of both beauty and subversion. Alessandro finishes his work and the fresco is unveiled. The crowd is in awe. The bishop is pleased. The artist is a hero. No one, not a single person, sees the tiny, coded confession that is hidden in plain sight. The truth is there, but it is a secret, a quiet understanding between the artist and a few scattered believers. The fire has gone from the pyre to the printing press, from the mind to the sword, and now it is in the eye, a silent visual heresy that is 100 times more difficult to fight. The church can burn a book, but how do you burn a painting? How do you unsee a secret that is hidden in plain sight? Alessandro, the quiet artist, is a new kind of heretic, a man who has found a way to spread the forbidden truth without a single word. His art is his confession, his canvas his pulpit, and his paint his ink. The book's ideas are now a part of the cultural landscape, a permanent, beautiful stain on the world. The journey of the book is a testament to the idea that some things are too important to be lost, and that the human spirit, when it is faced with oppression, will always find a way to express itself, even if it has to do so in silence. The artist's coded confession lives on in a cathedral fresco, a silent testament to the book's enduring power. The book itself, however, has gone from a tangible object to a series of fragmented ideas, a memory that is passed from person to person through art, whispers, and secret symbols. Its physical form, a beautiful Tuscan manuscript, is now a ghost in an ancient tomb in Alexandria. But as you know, nothing stays buried forever. Time is a great revealer of secrets, and you are about to witness the book's final grand revival. You're now in the year 1888, and you're in a new city, an old and quiet one, Venice. The air here is still and cool, smelling of canal water and the quiet rot of history. Your focus is on a very old man, a book collector named Alvis. Alvis is a man who has lived a long life, a life of quiet luxury and a secret obsession. He is a collector not of art but of ideas. His home is not a museum but a library, a sprawling chaotic collection of books that are, in some way, all heretical. He has books on ancient Gnosticism, on Hermetic philosophy, on alchemy, and on all the countless ideas that were deemed too dangerous to live in the light. He is a man who has spent his life in the shadows, a man who has a quiet, morbid fascination with the things that the world has tried to forget. He is also a direct descendant of Martino, the merchant who was burned at the stake for the forbidden book. The story has come full circle. Alvisi knows his family history. He knows that his ancestor died for a book that no one has seen in centuries. He has dedicated his life to finding a copy, a kind of posthumous revenge on the institution that murdered his ancestor. This is a mainstream historical fact. The long sprawling history of the Forbidden Book is not just a tale of persecution and rebellion, but also a tale of generations of obsessive collectors. Men like Alvis, who had the money and the passion, were the quiet librarians of heresy, the men who, in the privacy of their homes, kept the embers of dangerous ideas alive. They were the ones who, in a world that wanted to forget, chose to remember. They were the quiet heroes of intellectual freedom. Alvise is on his deathbed now, his body a frail, crumpled sack of bones, his mind still sharp and clear. He has never found a copy of the Forbidden Book. He has searched his whole life, followed every rumour, bought every manuscript that even hinted at its existence, but he has never found it. His great search, his life's work, has been a failure. He is about to die, and he is filled with a profound and quiet sadness. But as he lies there, an old, forgotten memory resurfaces. He remembers a story that his father told him when he was a boy, a story that he always thought was a fairy tale. His father told him that the family, in the chaos of Martino's execution, had a plan. They knew the church would search their villa for the book, and so they had a plan to hide a final last copy. The family had a copy of the book that was not the one that was burned with Martino. They had a second backup copy. This is a point of open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the story of a second hidden copy of the Forbidden Book is a myth or a reality. Some scholars argue that it is a beautiful and enduring myth, a kind of spiritual metaphor for the fact that the book's ideas would always survive. They argue that the story of a hidden copy is a kind of narrative necessity, a way for the story to have a satisfying ending. Others argue that it is a historical reality, and that the existence of a second hidden copy is a key to understanding the book's long and mysterious life. They argue that the underground networks were far more organised and far more clever than we give them credit for. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in the middle, but for Alvis, a man on his deathbed, the myth is the reality. One of the more quirky tidbits from this part of the story is the way his father hid the book. He didn't just hide it in a wall or in the floorboards, he hid it in the very thing that was meant to hide it in plain sight, a tombstone. The family had a large, ornate tomb in a Venetian cemetery, a grand monument to their wealth and piety. The tombstone was a massive slab of marble, and it had a hollowed-out section in the back, a secret compartment that was meant to hold not a body but a book. The father had a final, quiet act of defiance. He had the book placed in the tomb, a book of life in a place of death, a book of truth in a place of lies. It was a beautiful and deeply ironic final hiding place. Alvisi, in a final last burst of energy, calls his son to his side. He tells him the story he has never told anyone, the story of the second hidden copy. He tells him where to find it. He tells him that the book is the family's true inheritance, the family's true treasure, a treasure that is worth more than all the money and property in the world. He tells his son to go and get the book, to find the truth that has been hidden for so long. The son, a modern man of the late 19th century, a man who is more interested in business and commerce than in ancient heresies, is sceptical. He thinks his father is just a crazy old man, a man who is living in a fairy tale. But he loves his father, and so he agrees. He goes to the cemetery, a place of quiet, green beauty and ancient stones. He finds the family tomb, and he searches it, and to his surprise, he finds it. He finds the secret compartment in the back of the tombstone. He opens it, and he sees it. A small, plain, unassuming book, its pages yellowed with age, its cover a dark, almost black leather. He takes the book, and he holds it in his hands. It is the forbidden book. It is the book that got his ancestor burned at the stake. It is the final, last copy. The book is not in a library or a museum or a secret society. It is in the hands of a simple man, a man who is not a scholar or a believer or a heretic. He is just a man who has been given a legacy that is 1,000 times more dangerous than he can possibly imagine. The book has been found. The ghost has been given a body. The quiet, heretical fire has been rekindled. The book pulled from its marble tomb is now in the hands of Alvis's son, a man of the late 19th century. He holds it, not with the reverence of a scholar or the fear of a heretic, but with the detached curiosity of a modern mind. He sees it not as a magical object, but as a historical artifact, a tangible link to a romantic and brutal past. He doesn't read the book. He places it in a vault in his bank, a place of cold steel and impersonal security, and he forgets about it. The book's journey, it seems, has come to a mundane, unceremonious end. The quiet, heretical fire has gone out. Or so it seems. You are now in a new era, a new century. The year is 1999, and the world is on the cusp of a new technological revolution. The internet is no longer a tool for a few academics and geeks. It is a new kind of public space, a new kind of library, a new kind of underground. The old rules of information, the old world of physical books and geographic borders are about to be shattered. You're no longer in a single place. You're a ghost in the machine, a silent observer in the vast interconnected world of the internet. Your focus is on a young man named Leo, a computer programmer who is a part of a quiet, anonymous subculture of digital archivists. They are men and women who, in the dark corners of the internet, are trying to create a new kind of library, a library of all the information that the world has ever created. They are the digital descendants of the ancient scribes and the medieval manuscript hunters. They believe that knowledge should be free, and they are using their skills to make it so. They are an online community, a network of people who are united not by geography or by belief, but by a shared passion for information. One of the more quirky tidbits from this part of the story is the way they communicate. They don't just use email or chat rooms. They use a kind of digital language, a series of cryptographic ciphers and hidden codes that are embedded in the very structure of the internet. They can communicate in plain sight, in a public forum, and no one would ever know what they were talking about. It's a kind of digital spiritual language, a silent coded conversation that is happening in the quiet corners of the internet. It's a brilliant modern-day version of the secret hand signals that the heretics used centuries ago. Leo has a new project. He has received a tip from an old anonymous source, a man who has sent him a series of digital photos of an old manuscript. The photos are blurry and out of focus, but Leo is an expert. He uses a series of complex algorithms and digital tools to enhance the photos, to make the text legible, and as he does, he sees it. He sees the beautiful old Italian script. He sees the words that got people burned at the stake. He sees the forbidden book. It's a moment of profound, quiet awe. He is a man who is looking at a piece of history that has been lost for centuries, a ghost that has finally found its way back into the world. This is a mainstream historical fact. The internet, from its very beginning, was a powerful tool for the distribution of forbidden and controversial information. It was a new kind of printing press, a new kind of underground network. It was a space where people who were marginalised or censored could find a voice, and a space where old ideas that were thought to be dead and buried, could be resurrected. The internet was a digital library of Alexandria, and the digital archivists were its librarians. This is a point of open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the internet is a force for good or for evil. Some scholars argue that the internet, with its ability to distribute any kind of information, is a powerful tool for liberation and democracy. They argue that it has made the world a more open, more transparent, and more connected place. Others argue that the internet is a powerful tool for misinformation and propaganda, a place where old, dangerous ideas can find a new, more powerful audience. They argue that the internet is not a library, but a battlefield, and that the war is being fought not with swords, but with bits and bytes. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in the middle. The internet is both a force for good and a force for evil, a mirror that reflects the best and the worst of humanity. Leo begins to transcribe the book. He's a man who is not a scholar, or a heretic, or a believer. He's just a man who is doing his job, a man who is giving a voice to a ghost. He is transcribing the beautiful old Italian script into a new, digital language, a language of zeros and ones. He is taking a physical object and turning it into a digital ghost. He is making the book eternal. He's putting it on the internet. And as he does, he realizes something. The book's ideas, which were so dangerous in a world of limited information, are now even more dangerous. In a world of infinite information, the truth can get lost in the noise. The heresy is no longer a whisper, it is a roar, and it is a part of 1,000 different conversations, and it is almost impossible to tell the difference between the truth and a lie. The book's ideas are a virus, a meme, a piece of information that is designed to spread. The book is now a part of the digital world. It is on 100 different servers, on 1,000 different websites. It is being downloaded and copied and shared by people who have no idea of its history, people who see it not as a dangerous heresy, but as a quirky, interesting piece of history. The book's long journey has come to an end, and it has found its final, eternal home in a place that has no borders, no censors, and no fire. The heretical fire has gone digital, and it is now 1,000 times more dangerous. You feel a sense of unease. How do you fight a ghost? How do you burn a book that is not a book, but a series of numbers in a machine? The journey is over, but the story is just beginning. The book, once a tangible object of parchment and ink, is now a digital ghost, a series of ones and zeros replicated and dispersed across 1,000 servers. Its long, perilous journey from a scribe's dusty room in Venice to the cold, impersonal world of the internet is a testament to the enduring power of ideas. You are a silent observer in this final act, a ghost in the machine, watching as the book's ideas, once a whispered heresy, become a part of the vast, chaotic sea of human knowledge. The book, in its new digital form, is no longer a secret. It is a torrent, a stream of data that flows freely, finding its way into 1,000,000 different minds. Its old enemies, the Inquisitor, the King, the Censor, are powerless now. You cannot burn a book that has no body. You cannot arrest a person for a thought that is shared by 100,000 people. The book's ideas are now a part of the collective consciousness, a ghost in the network that is 100 times more difficult to fight than any physical army. This is the final stage of the book's journey, the moment when it transcends its physical form and becomes an immortal idea. This is a mainstream historical fact. The evolution of information technology, from the hand-copied manuscript to the printing press, and from the printing press to the internet, has always been a story of decentralization and democratization. Each new technology has made it more difficult for a single authority to control the flow of information, and each new technology has given more power to the individual. The Forbidden Book, a product of a world of scarcity, has now found its final, perfect home in a world of abundance. It is a story that has been playing out for centuries, a quiet, intellectual war that is being won not with swords, but with ideas. The book's core ideas, that the divine is an immanent force, that every person carries the divine within them, that true salvation is a matter of personal spiritual experience, are no longer the property of a few scattered heretics. They are now a part of 1,000 different conversations. They are in the quiet spiritual musings of a blogger in Japan, in the complex coded poetry of an artist in Brazil, in the philosophical debates of a group of students in a university in America. They are a part of a new kind of spiritual movement, a movement that is not a religion but a series of interconnected personal beliefs. It is a kind of spiritual smorgasbord, a place where people can pick and choose the ideas that resonate with them. This is a point of open scholarly debate. Historians and sociologists still argue whether the internet and the new digital age is a force for spiritual growth or for spiritual chaos. Some scholars argue that the internet, by giving people access to a vast range of spiritual traditions and ideas, has made the world a more tolerant, more understanding, and more spiritual place. They argue that it has allowed people to create their own personal, meaningful, spiritual paths, free from the constraints of dogma and tradition. Others argue that the internet, by creating a sea of information and misinformation, has made the world a more chaotic, more fragmented and less spiritual place. They argue that it has made it more difficult for people to find a single, coherent belief system, and that it has replaced deep, meaningful faith with a shallow and often dangerous kind of spiritual tourism. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in the middle. The internet is both a tool for spiritual liberation and a tool for spiritual confusion, a mirror that reflects the best and the worst of humanity. One of the more quirky tidbits from this part of the story is how the book's long and dangerous history has become a kind of digital mythology. People who find the book on the internet and who have no idea of its history are now creating fan fiction, video games, and graphic novels based on its journey. The book is no longer just a spiritual text. It is a story, a narrative that has a life of its own. People are creating new characters, new plots, and new endings for a story that is centuries old. The book's journey, a story of fear and faith, of blood and fire, is now a part of a vast, playful, and irreverent digital mythology. It's a testament to the idea that some stories are too good to be forgotten, and that the human mind, when it is given a good story, will always find a way to make it their own. And as you watch the book's ideas spread, you realise something. The book is not a single object. It is 1,000 different objects, 1,000 different interpretations. It is not a single heresy. It is 1,000 different heresies. It is not a single truth. It is 1,000 different truths. The book is a living, breathing thing, a ghost that lives in the machine, and it is a testament to the idea that some ideas are too powerful to be contained. The fire has gone from the pyre to the printing press, from the mind to the sword, from the art to the digital realm, and in each new stage of its journey it has become more powerful and more dangerous. So now, as you close your eyes, and the final image of the digital ghost of the forbidden book fades, you can finally take a breath. The fear, the fire, the history, it all settles into the quiet hum of your room. The journey is over, but the story is not. The ideas, once contained in that single volume, are now everywhere, a part of the endless swirling conversation of humanity. They're a quiet reminder that a single forbidden book is not just a book. It is a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to question, to seek, and to believe. Let the final images of this long journey settle around you. The quiet, rhythmic scratching of Elias's quill in that dusty Venetian room, the gentle, salt-scented breeze on Alessio's ship, the silent, triumphant work of the printing press, the fear in the eyes of the man who faced the pyre, the quiet, determined walk of the scholar in Florence, the subtle, beautiful secrets in the artist's fresco, and finally the silent, invisible flow of 1,000,000 digital ghosts of the forbidden book, all of them a part of a new kind of library, a new kind of world. The sound of the words, which have been a source of both terror and beauty, now softens to a gentle whisper. The fire that once consumed bodies now only warms the air, a soft, comfortable heat that reminds you of a quiet night and a story well told. You're not a heretic, or a believer, or a spy. You're just a human being who has been a part of a long and beautiful journey, a journey that has taught you that some things are too important to be lost, and that the human spirit, when it is faced with oppression, will always find a way to express itself, even if it has to do so in silence. So now dim the lights, turn on a fan, and let the quiet, beautiful ghost of history settle around you. Sweet dreams.